coming. This is Talking Politics in Western Pennsylvania. Our guest today is Rick Saccone. Rick, always good to have you on the program.
Pleasure
We
to
haven't
be here.
had you for a long time, but we wanted to have you. You're in the midst of another campaign, and we wanted to have you on here again to discuss some of the issues in Harrisburg and some of the benefits that you've offered our community over the past many years. Let's start off with that, if you don't mind. We're going to start. One of the biggest benefits that this community has received from any of our representatives has been the Finleyville Bridge. Why don't you talk about that for a little bit?
Well, the Finleyville Bridge is it's an interesting topic because I remember when I first ran back in 2010. Remember that was basically a 1.5 lane bridge, and everybody had to stop and let the other side go through, back and forth, back and forth. And as Peters Township expanded and Union Township was expanding, that traffic became unbearable at that bridge. It became a real chicane there, and we're getting so many complaints. People, were getting road rage, and because at night that road would be backed up a mile.
Oh yeah.
And people said, "You got to fix the Finleyville Bridge." And I said, "Okay, it seems like a simple task. We'll do that." And when I got in, I proceeded right away to go after the Finleyville Bridge and see if we couldn't get that thing widened a little bit. Didn't seem like too big of a task. But then we faced the bureaucracy. We faced the bureaucracy in Harrisburg, and that's when I really found out just how thick that bureaucracy is. And we have a lot of rules, and I know rules are there for a purpose, and we need rules. But sometimes the rules are so onerous that it takes time, too much time and money. And so we started off with, we have to have an environmental impact study on widening that bridge, and we have to have an engineering study on what we want to do to widen that bridge. And then there's some railroad tracks there, and we have to coordinate with the rail industry and see what they, if the tracks will have to be raised or lowered or diverted. And that took, if I remember correctly, that took around $800,000 to do those studies. And then we have to say, okay, we find out we're going to have to buy some right-of-way property on both sides of that bridge from homeowners there to widen that bridge. So we're going to have to, negotiate with those homeowners to see if they're willing to sell a sliver of those properties, or whether it might have to be taken with eminent domain. And again, this is taking time. Years are now clicking by. Mm-hmm. And then we have to say, well, we're going to fund this. How much is the bridge going to cost? I think it was a couple $1 million now that I'm trying to think back the exact figures. But to actually just widen this small little bridge a half a lane more. And then we have to try to get that in the funding process. With all the budget problems we're having in Harrisburg, how are we going to get that in the process in the pipeline, so to speak, to be funded? So we were able to do that. That took, I think, a couple of years to get that in there. And then we said, no, now we're going to have to schedule construction and schedule these things out and work with the railroads and work with the PennDOT and so forth. And all these things. It ultimately ended up taking 5 years to widen a little bridge like that, a half a lane more. The bridge is beautiful now, as you drive over it. People go by it, and I hope as they're driving over it, they remember that we actually got it done. But it took far too long, is my point. And I think the regulations, while they're well intended, are sometimes onerous, and we need to be able to fast track through some of these things. I mean, on a small bridge like that, I use the example. Both my sons are civil engineers in the military. And we could have came out and put pontoons down and had tanks driving over that bridge in about 4 hours. But instead it took 5 years to widen that. And the aggravation that the people had to continue going through while we planned and worked and tried to fund that little bridge. People had to suffer through that. And it took a lot longer than I wanted to, but it was my first taste of just how thick the bureaucracy is. Now, I've had plenty of chances to see since then how often the bureaucracy gets in the way of trying to do the right thing.
Well, I pointed that out because of the fact that having been a resident growing up in Peters Township as well, that is probably the biggest single activity that has benefited our community that I can remember of any representative doing for this district. So I just wanted to make sure that most people don't know who was involved. They know it showed up. Okay, but I know that when my wife Monica is on council, and she was talking to you about that since the very beginning.
Yes.
And like I said, the next thing will be, I'm sure, the sewer authority down in Clairton is the other one of the other beasts that have four heads. But yeah, that's, we just talked before the program about issues that we're having and problems that we're having with the Department of Environmental Resources here for the state, DEP, on where we're building our new school. They found a couple bugs. And because of that few bugs, it has already cost an additional 40,000 plus in engineering fees and surveys and everything else that has had to be done. So, I mean, I don't know who gets, these are supposed to be public servants, and I don't know who they're serving. If it's just serving themselves to stay on a job for a long time or whatever. But as you said, it's becoming onerous to, in fact, trying to get anything moving forward. And it's costing our taxpayers. And that's what's really irritating me. These people are supposed to be there to help us, and they're not doing a good job of it. And the Department of Education, don't even get me started there, because that's a whole other bailiwick.
So when government becomes an obstacle, that's the problem. And that's why we have to look at these things. Another problem is when you start questioning these regulations, when you start saying, hey, look, maybe we've gone too far with this, then you're accused of, not wanting to help the environment, or you're against the environment, or you're against safety, or you're against this or that, when all you're trying to do is simplify and make sure that we have proper rules, but that they're not an obstacle to us getting things done. I was just down in Scottsdale a couple of weeks ago. I posted a video about this. I was talking to a guy who has a lumber company, and he makes crates. And he has maybe a 2x4 length, maybe it's a 6-foot 2x4, but he only needs 4.5 feet of it. So he cuts off the remaining part that falls off his scrap, and he puts it in a big bin. And for years he's been, it's pine, so he can burn it easily. And they have an ordinance in the township says he could burn it, and he'd been burned for decades. Until one day an inspector walked in and said, "What are you doing with that big bin of scrap wood over there?" And he says, "Well, we burn it. We've always burned it." He says, "Well, you can't burn that." And he says, "Why not?" And he says, "Well, that's not scrap wood." He goes, "That's once you cut a piece of wood, it now becomes a waste product, and a waste product has to be mulched and sent to a landfill." And he's like, "Well, we've never had a problem with this." No, it has to be. It's no longer. It's now considered a wood waste byproduct. And so he had to go through extra expense of mulching and grinding this up and sending it off to a landfill. That's another expense to be buried. When we could have done what we've been doing for decades and decades, because somebody declared that the extra piece of 18 inches of wood that was cut off is no longer wood. It's no longer classified as wood by the government. It's classified as a waste byproduct that has to be dealt with differently. So, and I go to businesses all the time, and I get these stories. I collect these stories of government overreach, when government becomes an obstacle because of regulation. I'm sure that regulation was well intended for some reason somewhere, but it was applied in a different way that is actually hurting a business, and we shouldn't be doing that.
Well, we talked, whenever I was teaching, we talked earlier about regulations with good intentions. And this idea of having whole wheat bread in our schools, I'm sure somewhere along the line had good intentions, but the ramifications of that. Whenever I taught 8th grade, I in fact had lunch duty, as many beginning teachers do. And the kids were buying lunch and then walking out and dumping it. And then going back and get their soft pretzels and their cheese sauce or their donuts or whatever else, because they had to buy lunch before they could buy dessert. So they were wasting the money. And a study just came out from the Federal Department of Education that showed that kids are heavier now after those 8 years than they were before.
Yeah.
Whenever you're trying to force feed them stuff that they wouldn't eat to begin with, and it's, like I said, the good intentions. I totally believe that somewhere, that there are some sort of unique little fish that should be saved. I have no problem with that. But whenever you're on a golf course and you're changing it over to a school, all the chemicals that those golf course people put down over all those years, I said, you have bugs with 8 heads, and now we have to save that because what? It's just there's something wrong with it, as you say, the government overreach into these areas that used to be simple.
Yeah, I'll give you one more example real close to to where I live. A local businessman there came to me and said, "Rick, I want I want to expand my parking lot. Now, this is land that I own. It's my business, and I've had it for years. It's a restaurant, and I want to expand my parking lot. And there's a stream that divides my parking lot, and there's a pipe there. There's a big pipe that goes through it. I just want to extend that pipe. The pipe's already there. I just want to extend it another 20 feet and cover that over with dirt. And so I'll have parking there, and you can get from one side of the parking lot to the other very easily. I'm not disturbing the stream. I'm not doing anything else. I'm just extending the pipe that's already there. But the government came out and said, no, you can't do that. First, we're going to have to do an environmental impact study. There might be something in that stream. There might be fish that could be affected by that extension of that pipe. And that's going to cost you, I think he said, if I remember correctly, $40,000. And he said, I just can't do that. This is my own property. He says, why can't I be able to extend a pipe that's already there? I'm not changing the direction of the stream or doing anything with it. And we fought. They brought me in. I tried to work with the bureaucracy on it to try to make it happen for him. We couldn't make it happen. He couldn't afford to do the things that they wanted him to do. And he ended up selling the business. Now, that was a legitimate business that had been there for many years, that he was trying to make work, serving the public. Many people enjoyed that restaurant. Because of government overregulation, he was forced to sell that business. And those are the things that people are frustrated with when they say, we want a government that's out there protecting us, but we don't want one that's going too far and actually hurting us or obstructing us.
Well, we'll move right into government bills and things like that. Passing through the House is a bill, and we talked about it. And, you get thousands of bills that are presented to you all the time.
I do.
Okay, and I think the public should really know how they're presented. So, in fact, whenever, because I had a member of the school board actually contact me and say, listen, this bill states that you will no longer be able to run for school board on both parties anymore. It'll have to be a political position versus that of a non-political position. And he happens to be in a minority party. And I pushed to have him, I pushed the majority party to envelop him into our information because one, he's a good man, and two, the other person is also a very good person. And I wanted them, because I enjoy working with them because we've gotten a lot of things done. But the other thing is they're good people. And they should have the right to, in fact, have the opportunity where if you're in a minority in a majority group and it's only political now, the majority is going to run constantly the whole thing, and it's not going to be good for anybody. But your name is on there, as I mentioned to you. Your name is on there as having voted for the bill. Now, so people before they go, oh my God, why did he do that? Let's talk about the process, okay? And I think that's something that everybody has to understand, because whenever a bill's presented to you in the hundreds of forms that there are per week, how is it presented?
So, the process is we have about more than 2,000 bills a year come through us, come through the legislature.
And, excuse me, you're only in session for how many days? Total?
Well, we're in session several months out of the year, over 100, maybe 100 days.
Okay, so you're in session, but you have 2,000 bills coming in front of you. So this is why the process was originally set up, to give you a synopsis of the bill so you have an understanding of what the total meaning is.
Right. Now, that's not an excuse for us. We should be looking at every bill, but I've always complained that we didn't have enough debate on every bill. So we'll go into a caucus meeting. Well, first the bill has to go through committee. So
Right.
There's a committee process. So that's supposed to be the filter. And we're supposed to rely on the committees to vet those bills well, to make sure that, you got to get that agreement through the committee process. So before it comes to the House floor, it's gone through committee. And then when it's coming up on the House floor, we go into caucus. Each party goes into their own caucus and discusses the bill amongst themselves. And usually that bill is presented by one of the legal staff will get up and present that bill, and if there's any amendments to that, they'll talk about what the amendments are, proposed amendments, and then there might be some discussion on it. But unless you're well versed in that bill, or maybe you came from that particular committee, you might not know what all the opposing arguments are. Now, it'll list on the sheet who opposes the bill. And that's something I always ask. Who's against this bill? If you want us to be for a certain bill, then tell me who's against it and why they're against it. Mm-hmm. But sometimes to me, it's just my personal opinion, is we don't spend a lot of time in general. There are some bills where we might spend an hour or 2 hours discussing the most minute detail that you wouldn't even think would come up or be an argument. But oftentimes we go through bills and it's assumed that because it's already come out of committee that, this is a bill that's accepted and everybody should be for it. And we don't spend a lot of time discussing even what the other side is. And sometimes I would like to know what, we're on the Republican side, obviously. Well, are the Democrats going to be for this bill, or what arguments are they going to bring up? So sometimes we wait till we get to the floor to hear that debate. But by then, I would say many minds are already made up because we've already decided as a caucus we're for this bill or that bill. So again, that's not an excuse. It's just kind of showing the process, and I would like to see more debate. And I think because the fact that we're such a big legislature, we often don't have true debate on the floor. I think we come to the floor with our minds already made up. And so when people get up to talk about their side of the bill or another side of the bill, most people, if you've been to the floor of the House, you can see that most people aren't even listening. They're talking, they're off on other discussions, they're talking to each member, and sometimes the speaker has to gavel them in and say, hey, come on, we want everyone to listen. And but people aren't really listening. So as I said, their minds are often made up. I think most members would agree with me that very few minds are changed on the floor of the House in debate. Sometimes they are, because I've actually had members come up to me and said after I've spoken that you changed my mind. But it's rare. The general rule is, people's minds are already made up. And I think we miss some things there. And I think that may be part of the reason. It's just my theory as a political scientist that's why we often spend a lot of time in Harrisburg redoing bills, changing one or two words here or there a year or so later, because we didn't anticipate and we didn't maybe argue all the way through some of the unintended consequences. And it's hard. Don't get me wrong. This isn't something that it's an easy task to anticipate everything, but I would like to see more of that debate. Now, I've been to other legislatures across the country. I've been to 14 legislatures, and I've seen the smaller legislatures and how they debate. And it seems like they're actually listening and there's honest debate on the floor. I don't think we have as much of that. People get up and talk, but I don't think everybody's listening. So I don't think everybody is completely informed on all the arguments as maybe we should be.
Well, as a state committee member, I saw a lot of that, where they would come out and tell you what they wanted you to hear. Or if a certain legislator was backing a bill, he would tell you all the benefits and then walk away. So you didn't hear any of the negatives, just the benefits, and you're thinking, that's a darn good bill. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you get into it. We talked earlier too about this one bill the Senate is trying to push through, that they were asking all the school boards to do a resolution against it. And it was about giving vouchers. And the first line of who was going to get the vouchers were people whose kids were in the lower 15% of the school districts in Pennsylvania. Now that I can totally agree with. I have no problem. It's just the next two caveats that they put in there opened it up to everybody. And so, I mean, the ramifications of that, of course, would be that not only would bad schools be given that right, but then good schools or mediocre schools or medium schools or however you want everybody would be shifting, and it would be a transportation nightmare because the law requires us to, in fact, transport people to different schools within a certain mile range. They don't talk about that. So I voted against it here for the resolution, and finally it got to the words of the minds of the people, the ears of the people that were pushing the bill, and they pulled it. It was supposed to be voted on today, and they pulled it to change that verbiage to mean what they wanted it to mean. But once again, they were told this is what it is, and okay, that's a good idea, but they never read the ramifications. Rick, you just went through a very, it's not a contentious, but it's such a close race that it was like ridiculous. Millions, or what, half a million people voted?
About 200, over 200,000.
200,000 and
220,000.
600, 700 votes separated the two people.
At one point, we were 95 votes apart.
Yeah, like I said, it was amazing to watch. The sad part is, once again, Americans don't do their civic duty and get out to vote. And even though that was a decent, we have about 14,000 voters here in Peters Township alone. And a good almost 50% of those sat home. In foreign countries, and you've been there, and so have I, you know, they vote, they have their thumbs purple whenever they walk out, and you know, they have people willing to kill them for demonstrating their
Yes.
opportunity to vote. And we just sit home watching reruns. And it's just really sad that, in fact, we can't get voter participation up again. I don't, you know, whenever I was 18, when I was graduating here from Peters, you still had to be 21. So as soon as I turned 21, they changed the age to 18. Of course, that's what always happened. There's such a disappointment, though, because these kids don't know a lot of the history. They don't know what has happened. They're on, you know, they're eating soap pods. They're eating, you know, the newest thing is eating ramen noodles out of the toilet. I saw that the other day on Facebook. I'm going, what is wrong with these kids? These are the people that we're handing our country over to in years, and it scares the heck out of me because of the fact that, where do we go? You know, I don't know how we're going to get this group educated to a democracy so they understand what voting really truly means. Because there are only 10% or so of the kids between the ages of 18 and 21 that actually come out to vote. They want to make a difference, but they want to, you know, be anti the Second Amendment or anti the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is there to protect them. It's not there to protect other people. And it's really sad. As a social studies teacher, you know, I told my kids, don't ever give up your rights. And the other teacher who taught social studies in 8th grade came and said, why are you telling these kids that? I said, because you're an idiot, that's why. You know, you never tell anybody to give up, because when you need them, they'll be gone. And, you know, it's hard to understand that. Rick, you went through, like I said, this process, and it's really quite sad because your opponent was saying that the advertisements that was coming out telling about him bargaining a drug lord to 10 years, and he kept denying it. And then whenever WTAE had their debates, he admitted it, which I was about to run through the TV and just, you know, but the bottom line is, how do honest people run for office anymore? You know, people are more, there's one half is so anti-Trump, that's their whole platform. Whatever anti-Trump is, that's what they want to do. And we'd like to see good people in office because we want to trust them. We want to, you know, it used to be the time when we trusted the media. That's not the way it is anymore. But this morning I woke up and heard some guy who stole tons of fajita meat got 50 years in prison. I'm like, what is wrong with our judicial system? Something is drastically wrong. I don't know. It's just starting to drive me nuts. You know, I wonder why the kids don't have a good handle on government because of the fact that a lot of the teachers don't teach government. When my son was in high school 25 years ago, the Vietnam War had one paragraph in his social studies book. Well, we're not teaching history. We're not teaching geography. We're not teaching the things that got us to here, to this location. Most of these kids don't understand this used to be run by Shawnee Indians, this area. I was the Indian in high school here in Peters Township, which is scary all just by itself. But anyhow, you know, but that's why, you know, our yearbook was called the Shawnee because of the fact that, you know, this was the place. The Indian his name was Peter. So guess what? You know, it worked out perfectly, you know, and I'm sure there's somebody in some, you know, WPIL is going to say, you can't be the Indians anymore, that's degrading. It was never meant to be degrading. It was meant to be an honor to the founder of this area. And these people, like I said, that we lose history because of stupidity, you know, and I just, it's just irritating to me. I love history. I've always loved it. And to see it being destroyed, you know, tearing down, you know, symbols of what we've done. You know, you might not like General Lee, but you know what? He was a great general. And he was a great general for us during the Mexican War. So he wasn't, you know, he wasn't trying to be anti-American, but he was trying to be pro-Virginia. It's sad that people don't understand that. What they don't understand is after the war, a black man went to church, his church, went up for communion, and everybody else stayed away except for General Lee, who walked up and kneeled down beside him. people don't understand the truth in history and how they've distorted it over the years to make him look like a bad guy. He wasn't at all. He was a man on a mission to protect Virginia. He didn't care about the South. That was his home, Virginia. So, Rick, we have about 3 more minutes, okay? And I'm going to ask you, you're running again for another race. It's this whole thing has been crazy. You know, the special election, the time that you and Jan have been running around, meeting people, doing things. Rick, you're one of the most honest men that I've ever met.
Thank you.
And I find it disturbing that people can't look past the hype and see how good the people are to, in fact, get good people in the office. I want you to look into the camera and tell people why you should be the one that's on their ballot whenever the 15th comes out.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, look, our world is in turmoil. Our country is in turmoil. I've said this over and over. We have to make sure that we send the most qualified and experienced people with the best judgment to Washington to help govern. I have a background, a diverse background of over 40 years of experience in education, in government, in the military, in international business, and in diplomacy. Some unique skill sets dealing with North Korea, dealing with terrorism. I think I am a clear choice, the most qualified person, and I'm ready to serve you. My wife and I have been serving this area as a team for many years now, and we're ready to continue on serving you. So I hope you'll check out my record and that you won't listen to the nasty hype and all the negativity that's coming out, because it's false, and it's not good for our country. It's not good for our community. And I hope you actually look at my record and choose me on May 15th.
Yeah, people, they listen to the screaming and the hollering more than they listen to the truth anymore, and it's really quite disturbing all the way around. Rick, like I said, I certainly wish you the best of luck, and thank you very much for coming on the program again.
My pleasure.
I always enjoy having you here. For all those folks out there, if you go on to Amazon.com, you can buy your books. And I've read 3 of them already.
Thank you.
And I tell you what, and the one about God in our country is phenomenal. And I just, like I said, I was using that whenever I was teaching 8th grade. Of course, they've never heard anything about that. So it's just like, oh my God, you mean, our country is actually based on Christian beliefs. They had a president who didn't go along with that, which is a lie. But, he said it, and that must have made it true. Well, we learned. Rick, thank you very much for coming
Thanks for
on.
having me.
And it's always fun to see you and Jan coming on to the program, and we'll keep our fingers crossed and see what happens here.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Thank you very much for coming, talking politics in Western Pennsylvania. I'm Bill Merrell, and we'll look forward to seeing you the next time.